Well, now we come to the chief theme of what I want to discuss, Herder's ethics. His ethical view is a sort of tense combination of several different themes. And so we're going to have to tease out those themes and understand how they fit together. Being that he's unsystematic, he often discusses this idea here, that idea there. It's a little bit hard to put it together, and it's the kind of thing that requires a certain amount of conjecture. So that said, let me do the best I can. First of all, I've already mentioned that Herder is a subjectivist. He is somebody who is a sentimentalist. He thinks, in other words, that it's really a matter of feeling. But what do I mean in saying that it's a matter of feeling? We've got to be careful here, because Hume advances a very strong sort of position about this. He says, when I say that something like theft is wrong, for example, I'm saying I have a feeling of disapproval when I contemplate it. And so he says, what do I mean in saying it's wrong? I mean, I have a feeling of disapprobation in my breast. Well, Herder says, no, that's not right. It's not that that's all I mean. It is true that ethics rests on feeling, but it's not true that claims about ethics, about good or bad or right or wrong, in the end are just claims about feelings, or expressions of feelings, or something like that. There's a more complicated relationship. So Hume is right to say this is not a matter of reason, but it isn't simply a reductive thing that all I mean in saying that something is wrong is that I disapprove of it. So what we've got to be careful about here is, he says, trying to understand the nature of that dependence on feelings. Now, he is clear that he rejects moral realism. He rejects cognitivism. He says, look, in the end, there is no realm of moral facts that we are simply describing in saying that things are good or bad or right or wrong. But that leaves a huge amount indeterminate. What then is the basis? Well, we can say feeling. But what do we mean by saying that feeling is the basis? Let's think about the fact that this shows, in Herder's point of view, that ethical theories are fundamentally wrong. That, in fact, approaching ethics from the point of view of constructing a theory is the wrong idea. Now, I've already talked about his suspicion about theories in general, so part of his reasons involve that. Yes, the world is complicated, including the normative world about the judgments we make from an ethical point of view. And so we're not going to be able to capture all of it in the context of any theory. Moreover, a theory can be dangerous because it keeps us from looking in certain important directions. Instead, we just keep looking in the directions that the theory tells us to look. And all of that is true. All of that applies to ethics as well. But there's an additional factor. We're going to be looking not just in the wrong place and ignoring certain kinds of evidence. We're going to be looking for the wrong kind of thing. Now, why? We're going to be looking for rational justifications. If I judge that theft is wrong, for example, I'm going to be looking to justify it in various ways. Maybe like a utilitarian, I look at bad effects. Maybe if I'm Kant, I say, well, it was really a matter of using someone as a mere means for my own ends. Whatever I say about that, I am going to be looking for a justification. Herder says, look, if it's a matter of feeling, whatever that exact dependence relation is, it's not a question of pointing to the feeling as a justification. My feelings don't justify anything. The key point is this. I have a certain reaction to this. It involves feeling. It also involves concepts like right and wrong. But whatever is going on there, we have to understand the causal basis for my feeling that way. So he says the essence of ethics is not a matter of seeking justifications from a rational point of view. It's a matter of seeking causal explanations, looking for the causal basis, not the rational basis, for our ethical beliefs. That, he says, is what any sentimentalist ought to be doing, thinking, yes, it rests on feeling. Now let's understand our feelings. And how do we do that? Not by looking at rational justifications. That's, in the end, to simply push things down to reason again. No, instead we seek causal explanations of the feelings we have and the judgments we make on the basis of those feelings. Herder's approach to ethics, then, is fundamentally different from Kant's and from most ethical theorists. He's saying, look, first of all, we shouldn't be looking at a theory at all. So stop being an ethical theorist and think instead about, well, the ethical phenomena around you, ethical judgments, trying to understand them. And the way to understand them is to ask about their causal bases. So the fundamental task of ethics, he says, is not to seek rational justifications for action and judgment, but instead to seek the causal bases of actions and judgments, to try to understand why, from a causal point of view, we make the judgments we do. Now, he says, this is not a matter of saying, oh, those judgments are, well, then not to be taken seriously in their own terms. He does take them seriously in their own terms, but he thinks we can't understand them without seeking a causal explanation for them. That's the main task. And he says, look, if you're serious about ethics, you want to say people should be better people and they should lead better lives. Then how do you accomplish that? He says it's not by leading them to reason. It is not by constructing proper theories that they can then apply. Instead, it's affecting those causal bases. Understand why people do what they do. Understand why they make the judgments that they make, the decisions that they make, and then try to affect those decisions, those judgments, those actions by addressing those causal factors. So how do we do that? How do we actually affect the causal basis in a way that leads people to lead better lives and make better decisions? He says, well, first of all, we educate them. Now, educate, again, not exactly in the Kantian sense of, hey, let's give them theories. No, that's a mistake. That's going to lead them to look in the wrong place and to narrow their vision to just a certain set of phenomena. Instead, what we have to do is educate them more broadly, make them intelligent, critical thinkers, make them people who are aware of a wide variety of possible perspectives on things. We need to educate them very broadly in a sort of classical liberal arts sense. That's something that's going to be important because they need to bring a wealth of experiences to making their ethical judgments. And that wealth of experiences isn't something that any one person can have on their own. It's something that requires us to take advantage of the experiences of others, as revealed in literature, in art, in history, and in all the other things, including philosophy, that we have access to through a liberal arts education. The second thing he says is preaching. He is a religious person. He thinks that preaching is important. A preacher not only talks to you about what is good, holding up some examples of good behavior, bad behavior, but also urging you to do the right thing, to become a better person. He's in favor of all of that. He's in favor of going to church. And even if it's just for 1 hour a week, you're sitting there reflecting on your life, thinking about how to be a better person. He says, all that's good. And of course, not all preaching has to take place in the context of a religious service. In fact, it doesn't have to be religious at all. There's a huge amount of secular preaching where people urge this course of action or that course of action, or say, look at these phenomena, they're really important. All of that's vital. We need people making the case ethically here and there. We need people trying to urge you to become better. That's vital, whether it occurs in church or in some other kind of context. There are other ways we can look at ethical ideals, uphold moral heroes. Hey, be like that, be like that. A huge amount of historical education, especially in the early grades, at least used to be, that kind of presentation of moral heroes. Reading about people who were thought to be very, very good people. Reading about their lives. And so sometimes stories, sometimes entire biographies. But the idea was, hey, here are some people we think of as moral ideal types, as people who really were excellent people who showed you how to live well. Were they perfect? No. But did they do a great job at living? Yes. So teach people about moral heroes, people who have led excellent, virtuous lives, and who exemplify various virtues, who were remarkable in courage, or in wisdom, or in self-control, or in generosity, or a variety of other virtues. Show people what it's like to lead a good, virtuous life. Herder is an unabashed paternalist. He says one of the ways we do this is by having laws that prohibit immoral action and mandate moral action. Now, a lot of people, John Stuart Mill most classically and On Liberty, argue against that kind of paternalistic legislation. But I think Herder here is affected by Aristotle, who says, look, it would be fine to be a libertarian if everybody were a fully formed, fully developed adult in your society. But that's not true. There are children, for example, who need to be brought up with the right kinds of values and the right patterns and habits of behavior. There are lots of adults who are not yet fully formed, who are still shaping their characters, and we need ways of helping them shape them in the right direction. So Herder thinks all that is true. He thinks laws that actually push you in a certain direction, not because of harm to others or something else, but instead simply because that's the right way to live. That, he thinks, is a good thing. We need it for young people. We need it even for older people. Because, truth be told, none of us has a fully developed character. We are all in the process of forming ourselves throughout life. And so, even if the need for this is greatest for those who are youngest and the most unformed so far, still, even older people who are quite well formed in their characters need further encouragement to behave in ways that our society considers good, and discouragement from behaving in ways that society considers bad. Even at 70, you need things that help you shape your character. Finally, Herder says, literature and art play a very important role here. They are both ethically significant. Literature, of course, is geared largely toward aesthetic criteria. The idea is to produce an outstanding work of art, an outstanding work of literature. And the same thing is true for visual arts. It's true for film. It's true for music. But he says, look, that's not all. Yes, we want things that have a kind of aesthetic excellence, but we are also looking for an ethical, a moral excellence. That's vital, because those things shape our characters too. Yes, there are the actual people from the past we study as exemplars, but we also need fictional exemplars. People who are going to show us ways of living from both a model point of view, like, look, wow, I really admire that character. But also, in literature, we can explore bad ways of living. We can say, look at this character and look what happens to them. So Herder thinks that one of the most important criteria we can apply to works of art, including works of literature, is a moral criterion. We say, yes, is this work helping people to become better people? Or is it standing in the way? Is it misdirecting them? He wants literature with heroes, not with anti-heroes. He wants the good person in the end to thrive, not to meet with disaster. And if that person does meet with disaster, as in tragedy, it's due to a flaw in them. It's not just due to something outside of them. Conversely, somebody who's a villain, we want them to fail, to meet a bad end. He says we don't want them to end up actually living happily ever after. And here it's not so much a matter of appealing to Kant's impartial, rational spectator. It's a matter of saying, what effect does that have on the viewer? If you're looking at this work and you're saying, wow, this person was really terrible, behaved in ways we consider morally terrible, and yet thrived, in the end, lived happily ever after, that encourages people to act that way. We don't want heroes like that, he says. Similarly, with other kinds of art or music, we want it to be uplifting. We want it to be the kind of thing that inspires people, that affirms human dignity and human value, not the kind of thing that dehumanizes us. And so I think Herder would be appalled at many of the trends in 20th century art, for example. He would say there's something fundamentally wrong with a culture that produces buildings that are intentionally brutalist and ugly, that produces works of music that are screeching and unpleasant to listen to. He would say, no. I mean, look, if you're writing a film score and you need something highly dissonant for, an exciting part or a highly tense part, then fine. That's part of the overall work. But the overall work has to be, in the end, something that is uplifting and affirming of dignity. It is not something that should make us feel alienated and dehumanized. Now let's go back to this question about the nature of feelings and the nature of the dependence between ethical judgments and feeling. I've said that ethics rests on feelings for Herder, but what exactly does that mean? It's a complicated picture because Herder does not draw a sharp line between feeling and reason. the way that Hume, for example, does. Instead, he says, and here we've got partly a Kantian point, though even in Kant there's a sharp distinction between sensibility and understanding. And Herder says, look, by the time I get to an ethical judgment at least, those strands are very hard to disentangle. Because, after all, my reaction, for example, to an act of theft that I witness, is complicated. Yes, there's a feeling of disapproval, if you want to put it that way. But also, a lot of conceptual stuff is going on. I'm categorizing that as an act of theft. I am thinking that's wrong, and so I'm applying a concept at the same time, basically, that I'm feeling this. In addition, I'm aware of all sorts of things that are true of thefts in general. And so I'm thinking about all of that. There's a lot of thinking as well as feeling going on, and it's very hard to separate those strands. Is the judgment that it's wrong and the categorization of it is wrong? Is that the same as feeling disapproval? Well, he says, no, it's not the same. It does depend on that feeling. If I felt great about it, then I wouldn't judge it to be wrong. But it's not a simple thing. Basically, our feelings are themselves concept-laden. Our feelings are, in fact, theory-laden, because they're systems of concepts. Systems of concepts that are descriptive, that are thick in the sense that they're both normative and descriptive, and then the ones like right and wrong or good and bad that are purely normative. And he says all of that is kind of mixed together in this experience. I'm having a moral experience here. I see someone steal something and I think, oh, that's wrong. And I'm feeling that. But I can't really separate the aspects of emotion, of feeling here, and the aspects of reason, of concepts, of theories, and of all the knowledge I have. So one way to put it, in terms that might be friendly to, well, for example, Quine, is to say I've got a whole web of feelings and concepts and theories going together in this normative part of my conceptual structure. And it's impossible to disentangle those threads. Some of them are normative, some of them are descriptive, some of them are feeling, some of them are reason. It's all this big tangled ball, this tangled web. And so he says, in the end, once we say, look, yes, these judgments depend on feeling, but the feelings are themselves laden with concepts. It doesn't mean they reduce to concepts. It doesn't mean they're purely justified in terms of concepts, but it does mean they are entangled. They are all there together. Feelings are the basis of our moral thinking, but they aren't independent of thinking. It all comes together in a complicated, interdependent mass. So they aren't just thoughts. These feelings are not just thoughts. He doesn't have a cognitive approach to emotion here. But they aren't purely divorced from that either. They are on the borderline, if you want to think about a sharp divide between reason and feeling, or sensibility and understanding, to put it in Kantian terms. But really, I think Herder thinks there's something maybe wrong with thinking of those as two independent realms. They go together. We experience things already conceptually. Our experiences are concept-laden. And it is a theoretical move to try to say there are two sources of those things that are mashed together in our experiences.